Welcome, everybody. I'm Allison Kemmerer. I'm the Interim Director and Mead Curator of Photography and Senior Curator of Contemporary Art at the Addison. And it's my pleasure to introduce three artists today: Aphrodite Désirée Navab, Nicholas Galanin, and Talwst Santiago. We're going to begin today with a conversation between myself and Aphrodite for a half hour. And then I'm going to hand it over to the three artists who will be working in their respective studios, making art together and having conversation to which we can all bear witness and get a glimpse into the friendship of these three people and their ideas about art, their approaches to art, and sneak peeks into their studios. But to start, we are going to talk about the exhibition that's currently at the Addison, Landmines of Memory. This exhibition opened in January and is open until April 4th. So I hope many of you have been able to see the show. If you haven't, you have a few more days if you're nearby, and I encourage you to come visit. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't have an opening reception. So this event is really a way to celebrate Aphrodite and have a closing celebration. So I just want to first just quickly introduce Aphrodite, and then we'll get right into talking about the show and the work and her experience here as an artist in residence last year. To start, Aphrodite is an Iranian-born, New York-based artist whose work mines her Iranian, Greek, and American heritage to explore its competing histories and politics and its impact on her personal identity. She has a BA in Visual Environmental Studies from Harvard University and a doctorate in art education from Columbia University. Her doctoral dissertation, Unsaying Life Stories, a comparative analysis of the autobiographical art of four Iranians, is the first study specifically focused on the work of artists of the Iranian diaspora and was published in 2011. Her writings have appeared in numerous academic journals and anthologies, and she is taught at the University of Florida and School of Visual Arts. Aphrodite's art has been featured in many exhibitions, with her most recent solo exhibition prior to the Addison, When Madness Meets Hunger, occurring this past summer at Studio 26 Gallery in New York. Her work is included in a number of permanent collections, including the Addison, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, the Lowe Art Museum in Miami, and the Harn Museum of Fine Arts in Gainesville, Florida. Also, the Castorial Contemporary Art Museum in Naples, Italy. The author, before we get into our conversation, Reza Aslan, has written about Aphrodite's art, and I think it describes it beautifully. She says, Aphrodite's art is the aching inquiry of an uprooted consciousness seeking new roots. It also serves as a site of critical dialogue and debate. Ultimately, Navab's art haunts our imagination with its beauty and complexity, inviting us to engage in a third space of transnational and cross-cultural initiations, leaving domination and demonization outside the picture. So I think you will agree with that assessment after we've talked about the work and you have a glimpse of it. We first became aware of Aphrodite's work because it was included in an exhibition, Men of Steel, Women of Wonder, that was organized by Crystal Bridges and presented at the Addison in the fall of 2020. And it was at that time that we invited Aphrodite to become an Edward E. Elson Artist in Residence. The work that was included in that show was a series of photographs that featured her own superhero, Super East-West Woman. And we thought that work and her larger work would offer lots of opportunities to engage students in conversations about present day debates about borders, inclusion and exclusion, and examinations of the complexities of individual, cultural, and national identity. So we were really eager to get her here. The one rule about artists in residence at the Addison is they have to interact with students in some way. And we just thought her work was perfect for it. And it turned out that was the case. Sadly, well, one thing is, when we first invited her, we had no idea she had a connection to Andover, but it turns out that her brother Alexander is a graduate of Phillips Academy, class of 1983. And before she came to campus, tragically and unexpectedly, Alex passed away. And this added a completely different dimension to the residency. And it was extremely bittersweet, but also made it all the more meaningful and an emotional experience. And it was during this time, while she was in residence, that she created the series of drawings that comprise this current exhibition, which, by the way, I didn't tell you, the video is taking you through the exhibition for those of you who haven't been able to see it. So I just wanted to hand it over to you, Aphrodite, to just ask, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the residency, what you were thinking when you came to Andover, how these drawings came about, what sparked the inspiration, how it evolved.
Thank you, Ali. I appreciate the introduction so much and your incredible role in the entire process, from residency to exhibition. I honestly always wanted an artist residency, but I have had one child since I was 24, and then the second child at 34. So I have never physically been able to leave them. As a single parent, they've had school. It's never been possible. So after the Crystal Bridges traveling show, when you and Jamie were first contacting me, I was like, yes, I think it's time. I can do it. I can do it. My parents will watch Bijan. And so I was so excited. And my daughter is 25 now. She's teaching and totally independent. So I could, with clear conscience and open heart, just play and be a resident somewhere else than home, making art from home. And so,
Right.
so I was super excited. And as you know, I had told my brother Alex when he was alive, I mean, he's just so special to me. I had told him, I was like, Alex, do you know that this group show is going to the Addison? The Addison is at Andover. He's like, yeah, it's a great museum. I went to it, when I was in high school. And meanwhile, we had only been in America for the first time for 3 years. Like we came in 1980 as immigrants, and we were from Iran, and we lived in Greece like 2 years after exile. But he was only in America since 1980, so he was 3 years. He was attending Andover from sophomore to senior year. So when he graduated in 1983, I was that little kid. I was born in 1971, and I was thinking 1983, I was a 12-year-old. I was really, I had no concept of high school yet. So I thought, wow, what a great campus. I visited him while he was there and when he graduated, but I didn't see the museum. I didn't even know there was a museum there. So I had told him about it, and he's like, we're going to come. The whole family's going to come. And we're going to be so excited for this museum show. And so that was before you even invited me for the residency. And I was debating, is it too painful? Is it just too painful? Do I have even anything to create from? Do I have artist block? And is it just too painful for even drawings? Forget about words. I had no words for the loss. But after his sudden cardiac death in July 2019, I was like, I want to make this. I want this both as my healing process, but also my source of creativity, because it comes from somewhere. And for me, it always came from history, culture, identity, family, politics, both being burdened by it, but then also enriched by the positive sides. And I was like, I must do it. It's part of my lamentation and healing process. At the same time, it's such abstract work that I think other people can tap into it. Little did I know there'd be a pandemic. I had no idea that the whole installation would be basically curated in close contact with you, Ali, and the installation team virtually. And then the bonus of being with Yoko Ono, who I admire deeply. And, she's exactly my father's age. And I told my father, I was like, you know, Baba June, Yoko Ono and you are the same age. I feel extremely grateful and blessed, and I'm humbled by this opportunity to show with her. And I feel like these are sister shows, and I'm very grateful to the Addison and to Ali for bringing this together, for curating this, because right now these two shows have a great deal of meaning and potency for what we've been going through for a year. How did I know? I don't know. I
Right.
could never predict this, but
Well,
when
I think that's what's so interesting, the idea of, I'm just intrigued by this balance of the artist's individual story and the universal aspect, and finding that balance between telling your story, but also making it open enough that we can enter as well. And the fact that your work and Yoko's, it's about individual emotions and experiences, but it also reflects this much larger time. I mean, the serendipity of this time that both of these shows were scheduled, which were thought about independently, was perfect. And at a time when healing is so needed on a more global level, I think the timing couldn't be more perfect. But I'm also interested in what are your strategies for, because your work really does do that. It's very personal, but it's so accessible. And I guess part of that too, I'm just thinking about the installation. There's a very prescribed sequence and way you would like people to travel, which I think is part of that. With each image, we follow your story, but we're also creating our own. And at the end, it's this communal, almost celebration or freeing of pain and weight. So could you talk more about sort of how you came about the installation itself and why you wanted things hung in this?
So I was excited and scared. I had never done an artist residency before. I had never left my kids before. So I was a grown woman. So I was like, listen, I have these ideas and these themes that are captivating me right now. And I have all this in my heart too. So there were things in my mind and things in my heart, and I wanted to explore them. And one of them, I was already exploring love relationships and the labyrinth. And at first I was calling the labyrinth, the love labyrinth. And it was about just, toxic relationships, and there's a hero, there's a demon. You can be the agent to put yourself out of destructive relationships. And the path outward is the same thread that gets Theseus out of the labyrinth, but there's Ariadne involved. And so they're heroines, they're heroes, they're demons. And basically you can incorporate, you can physically embody all of them in your own psyche. So I was exploring that already and thinking about, my mom's Greek, heritage and myths. And then I was so fascinated at AIR Gallery, which is my home, my sisters. I'm very, very, very proud to be part of this. This is the first, this is the oldest feminist collective and nonprofit and artist-run gallery. And I have to say, I was already exploring at the NADA show in New York, the Patience Stone. So I was like, that's the Persian mythological stories. And both are, sides of my identity that I was born with. Like I was at once an Iranian Greek born in Esfahan, Iran, and Greek name, last name, Persian, Greek first name. I was always struggling with two identities and two cultures that are extremely proud of their heritage and sort of xenophobic in a sense in their history. And they fought with each other. So they were enemy empires, but I saw nothing but love and respect between my parents. And I traveled to Greece every summer as an Iranian Greek kid. So I was like, I'm going to use Iranian myths, I'm going to use the Greek myths. But as I was going through very painful loss and healing communally with my family and friends over my brother, I was like, but I don't buy this ending to the story. I want a different story through my art. So in the Patient Stone story, the Sangye Sabur, or the Stone of Patience, at some point, when people keep pouring their secrets into this stone, which is like a diary, they keep pouring and pouring their secrets, it ends up just exploding with all the secrets that it contains. Because how can it contain that many secrets, you know? So it explodes, and then it causes death and destruction everywhere. So it's very pessimistic. It's a foreboding kind of dystopian myth. And I felt like, you know, I love the patient stone. I love people pouring things into this silent vessel that can't talk back to you and can't be printed elsewhere, can't be publicized and can't go viral. A real secret diary, you know, but without. So I thought, what if patient stone metamorphs into something different and something that can fly and be unfettered, you know, with all of the things it contains. And why can't it get lighter? Why can't it just become something? Why can't there be transformation? So that's something that inspired me since Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. And I had explored that in an earlier ink drawing series where I had a dance and dialogue between an Iranian novelist, Sadegh Hedayat's Blind Owl, which was highly autobiographical, a novel that was highly autobiographical, and Franz Kafka's the Hunger Artist. And these two, that was a novella. It was a very long short story, and these two, I brought the authors because the work was autobiographical, and the characters and the stories in a dialogue with each other. And I kind of carried the message with me, which is you can, through art, transform stories. You can take what's your cultural inheritance, if it's two competing ones, if they negate each other, you can try alternative, you know, solutions and routes and possibilities, and maybe envision a different future. So I just came to the Addison with the patient stone in my toolbox, and the lab, which I was already exploring. And I had lost, and I came with my best friend Johannes, and you know, he came to support me, and I felt like, you know, I am going to explore this. I don't know what's going to happen. And so every day while I was alone, he went back to his gallery in New York City, and he launched me. My family couldn't come. They were in mourning. So I started just with the you know, labyrinth and with Farsi letters, as if people were confessing, into the Greek. And then I was also having the Farsi letters go into the patient stone. And then you see these vessels and things morphing into, at the end, a crow. And I was working just with imagination. So, you know, the work looks abstract and does not look very representational. Towards the end, you might see a bird-like figure, but basically all,
it teeters.
yeah. All of,
I like to just sort of destiny how, you know, you did a lot of walking on campus, just as this exhibition requires that walking, and that you stumbled on the bird sanctuary as well as the seating area with the stones, sort of reinforcing the ideas you already came with, and kind of
it's so true.
finds that that was the way to go.
I've never done a site-specific installation, and I felt like I wasn't just connected to Andover through my brother and through a group show that had introduced me to you in the first place. I actually walked, you know, I went from 13 miles of walking for a year to 11 miles of walking, and it was my way of dealing with grief. So I always walk away my worries. I also walk my thoughts for an exhibition or a series. So I was used to walking since I gave birth to my daughter, really walking. So it turned into 13 miles for my brother for a couple of years. Then I went to 11 miles. And then on Andover's campus, I discovered 11 slabs of stone in a circular arrangement. And it looked primeval and primal and Stonehenge-like to me. And I was like, I see stones of patience and a labyrinth in a circle. And I'm walking 11 miles and these are 11 stones. I was like, so, you know, at that time I was reading a lot of Jung and synchronicity. I just felt this is not an accident. These are, you know, acausal events. They didn't cause each other, but they are meaningfully connected. So I was like 11 stones, labyrinth, patient stone, um, you know, 11 hours of walking, this particular campus, this particular high school, this particular museum. And some of it was seemingly unrelated, but they are meaningfully related. And all the more meaningful when you add the personal element. So and then I fell in love with the random walking to the bird sanctuary, and the birds came out. And I think already Crystal Bridges, I was talking about flight as a metaphor for freedom. And for those people who flee from home, that the home becomes inhospitable or dangerous, even like Iran was during the revolution. So I thought of flight as a metaphor for freedom. So Super East West Woman was my answer to the former president, George Bush's Axis of Evil speech. I was like, what about our kids who are in public school classrooms, my kids, who are all identify as Iranian and American and Greek, and they're being called dirty Iranians, go back home, or you're evil, or you caused September 11th, and Iran had nothing to do with it. But people who look like Iranians, people who might have had Islam in their background, or I don't know. So the stereotyping, the racism, the demonization, I felt like it was 1980 all over again, and the American hostages were released in Iran. But I felt it for my daughter, and I felt it for my son in the future. And I was like, I want to create a heroine that actually is like Superman, but she's wearing a Persian veil, a chador, and that chador is going to turn into a cape. So this idea of taking metaphors that I turn around,
Mhm.
the chador doesn't hamper her, it doesn't make her passive. She actually has agency. She can turn it and transform it into a cape, and she can fly and chase away the evil that the US blames Iran. But when I left in 1980, Iran had called the US the great Satan, and that I had learned in Farsi. So I was like, okay, if you guys are both Satan, then you're doubly evil, and it like the evil cancels each other out. So what does this mean anymore? So I was poking fun. I was already poking fun at the way the Greeks and the Persians demonized each other, and then later on, Iranians and the US would demonize each other. It's almost like I think I was destined to challenge both and then three. It ended up being three different cultures of my identity.
Right.
So
All of which are reflected in this series. I love that the idea of the power of art to offer alternate endings, alternate realities. And also I love how you talked about with this series, you literally and physically drew your way out of your grief into a new place. I just think that's so beautiful. And I wonder too, as you were drawing, just about the drawings themselves, was it intuitive? Just creating one drawing after another as this cathartic process, or was this a really fully formed story in your head where you went from one image to another? This is what will happen next, or how did that?
it's so interesting. I never know. And I worked when I was at Harvard undergrad, I fell in love with black and white photography. But before then, in high school, I was doing nothing but drawing and printmaking aside from my academics. And my family at first, they're like, no, don't go into art, go into medicine like your father. And so when I started at Harvard, I was starting pre-med, curricular courses, but then I was thinking of becoming a doctor. But then I took my first drawing course, then my first black and white photography course, like officially. I wasn't doing it on the side, and I fell in love. And I knew that my life, I cannot go back. I don't want to do anything else. On a Friday or Saturday night, I was in the dark room or I was drawing in my room. So you didn't have to pay me or could college to do this. So it was like a party for me. So I fell in love with that. And that was my major. Back then, visual arts was visual and environmental studies. And from then on, I just, the first series I did was my mother and myself, but conceptual and reconstructed filmic stills of the revolution in Iran, where I saw my mom wearing a hijab for the first time. So those images are rare, but I think when I graduated from college, it was one of the first prizes I won in different arts competitions throughout the country. And I went and looked at those pictures, and I was like, I'm going to post it on Instagram soon. One of the first awards I won, purchase award for a photograph, was my mom veiled, and I was reenacting the revolution in Iran, and the sort of violence it was for girls who never saw their moms veiled and had to be forcibly veiled, but saw their grandmothers, voluntarily choosing, because they were a different generation and they wore the veil. So it was something I was exploring in college, and it was my first series ever. And so my first it was documentary, but also fictional, and reenacted photography. And from then on, I think my drawing, my printmaking, my photography has been similar, like where I stage quite personal and to me very true stories, but they're reenacted, and they are for they're for the public, and they can connect to it from their own histories and backgrounds. So I came to the Addison not having any idea other than these myths that I wanted to investigate. And I was excited and frightened at the same time. And I had a ton of materials to work with and solitude. So it was my first time without a child running around my house or my studio. So I felt like this is about you exploring these things, heart and mind and body and soul, and you have the freedom and the support to do it. So I did it. And now when I went to see the work over the weekend with my kids, I was like, wow, they're bigger than I remembered, and they're pretty good. I feel like
They are pretty good.
I hadn't done it in a year, so, or more than a year. So I felt like, this was very solitary, unplanned, intuitive. It says a lot about the collective unconscious and Jung. I remember earlier when I had my solo show in New York at Johannes Voigt Gallery, I had gone to Paris, and I was alone too. My kids were away, and I felt like I was making ink drawings in my close friend's apartment, very similar to what I would see in museums in Paris. And I was like, how is this the Paris abstraction movement? I never really learned this in college. How is it I'm tapping into this collective unconscious? I have no connection to these Parisian artists and the Paris abstraction movement. And when I saw the style of the, expressionist work or the abstract ink drawings or the heavily influenced printmaking work, I was like, wow, I have people in the past, not connected to my family or the cultures, who are making this kind of work about certain issues and ideas and war. And so I was quite moved. And that was at the Centre Pompidou. I just lived there. So I only had, a couple of weeks of freedom as a mom to do this. So I realized that this is something I'm tapping into larger than me.
Yeah, and that's clear. I love that it was birthed out of this solitary experience, but it's a communal experience now as the exhibition, and something we can all relate to, and something that's helped us as much as it helped you personally. And I think now maybe we should segue from the solitary to the communal and invite our two artists in. I feel like I'm just the warm-up act. The real act are the artists. So I think people are wanting to get into each of your studios and see you in the act of making. So I can just give brief intros for Curtis and Nicholas, and then I'm going to let you guys take it over. I will start with Curtis. Curtis Talwst Santiago is a multidisciplinary artist who was born in Edmonton, Alberta, and he studied as an apprentice of Lawrence Paul Uwelupton. I hope I pronounced that right. His practice explores issues of transculturalism, memory, and ancestry in the contemporary diasporic experience, as well as the absence of certain narratives in dominant culture. Santiago has exhibited internationally at venues such as the Drawing Center in New York, the Flag Art Foundation, New York, the New Museum in New York, the Broad Museum at Michigan State University, the Institute of Contemporary Art at Virginia Commonwealth University, the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan, Canada, the Perez Art Museum in Miami, Art Gallery of Ontario, Toronto, Art Gallery of Alberta, the Rooms, St. John's, Finland, and SCAD in Savannah, Georgia, among others. The artist was included in the inaugural 2019 Toronto Biennial of Art in Canada, the Sightlines 2018 Biennial, Casa Tomada in Santa Fe. He was featured in the 2018 Biennale de, I'm sorry, I'm losing place. You have so many.
You don't even, don't even,
Curtis.
things have happened. You don't
Lots
have to
has happened. No.
Yeah.
2018 Biennial in Dakar, Senegal. And he is currently an active board member on the board of directors for the Drawing Center in New York. He's been invited to be an artist in residence this September at Black Rock, Senegal. His work is in the permanent collection of the Studio Museum in Harlem, New York. And he now lives and works in, or he's currently living and working in Munich, Germany. So the great thing with Zoom is we have people in Germany, New York, Massachusetts, and Alaska today. Now, Nicholas Galanin is a Tlingit Ununga multidisciplinary artist and musician, as is Curtis, also a musician. I thought that was kind of interesting. His work often explores the complexities of contemporary indigenous identity, culture, and representation, embedding incisive observation and reflection into his oftentimes provocative work. He aims to redress the widespread misappropriation of indigenous visual culture, the impact of colonialism, as well as our collective amnesia. He earned his BFA at London Guildhall University in 2003, his MFA at Massey University in New Zealand in 2007, and he is apprenticed with master carvers and jewelers. Galanin has exhibited worldwide and participated in the Native American Pavilion during the Venice Biennale in 2017, in the Whitney Biennial in 2019, the Honolulu Biennial 2019, and the Biennale of Sydney in 2020. His work is in permanent collections, such as the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Art Institute of Chicago, Detroit Institute of Arts, LA County Museum of Art, MFA Houston, National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, the Peabody Essex Museum in Massachusetts, the Portland Art Museum, Vancouver Art Gallery, Anchorage Museum, among many others. We're really happy to have you participate. It's homage to Aphrodite and her friendship with you. So I thought I would just hand it over to you. And maybe Aphrodite, you could start by just talking about how you three became friends. You've talked about seeing yourselves as kindred spirits, and although you create very different work, there's shared threads and bonds that tie you together in sort of mining the past to inform the present. And have fun. And I'm gonna go away.
Ali, well, you know,
Thanks so much.
I appreciate
you.
Thank you, Ali, and I appreciate Nicholas and Curtis for joining me. I bamboozled them into joining. No, so you know, I was looking back at photos because my family, my friends know I take pictures and I document so many things that I care about and I'm inspired by. And I had met Curtis back in May 1st, 2018, and I was having dinner with my best friend Johannes in the Lower East Side on the Bowery. So there are pictures before and after I met Curtis, and then I went to see his show at the Freeze, I think there, right?
Yeah.
Randall's Island, which people confuse with the island I live in. I live on Roosevelt Island. They're like, oh, Randall's or Rikers. I was like, Rikers is the penitentiary, or Rikers is a different island. It's a prison, and Randall's Island is where they have sports events and big art events. And Roosevelt Island is where people live from very different backgrounds. They live. That's where I live. So I had met Curtis in 2018. Right off the street, we met each other. We had already been following each other's work on Instagram. And then Nicholas, last February, I went to the Peter Bloom Gallery for the first time ever in Soho. And it was because I was in a group show at the Zerker Gallery. And then I was there to get a limited edition Louise Bourgeois book. And then I fell in love with Nicholas's work. So I searched for him on Instagram, and then we started following each other. And ever since then, I just feel like it has been it's a virtual friendship. At the same time, with Curtis, it was real, but it all started with social media and Instagram, really, and each other's art, because we mostly post about our art, but we also post about things we care about: social issues, political issues, family. We post pictures of family, and it's like a diary and a catalog of our work, but also ourselves as people. And so that's how I have not met Nicholas in person yet, but we want to meet. We were going to meet in February when he was coming for his show or group show, and you were going to give a lecture, and then it was canceled. And then COVID happened. In huge capital letters, COVID happened. So I think that since this museum show really never had an opening, and never had a sorry, I have family calling me. It never had something physical and in person. I was like, I want to make art with these two guys. I just do. And I don't know when and how and where we can do it. And now virtually we can do it. They could give us some of their time in their studio spaces. I'm not even in my studio because I am actually, I have, during the pandemic, been taking care of my parents and living with my parents. And this is my artwork in the back, but this is not my studio. So I recreated the studio because I'm portable. I could take this stuff anywhere. Some of it is really quite small. So I'm all ready to draw with my friends. And we want to meet in person one day. And I think right now we can meet virtually. So I'm excited to draw with Nicholas and Curtis. I feel, there's a poet I've loved a lot, and he's the 14th century Persian poet. He's a Sufi mystic, and he wrote, like, my heart and your heart are very, very old friends. And so I would just change it. My art and your art are very, very old friends, and we come from different backgrounds, but we're here in this space, and we met through social media, and it was our art who introduced us to each other. And I feel like we're very, very old friends. So that's my introduction. And that was Hafez, by the way. Did I mention his name? I don't think I mentioned. He was a poet from Shiraz in the 1300s.
A great introduction. Thank you. And thank you for having us and sharing. I do feel like there's we connected through our work over the process and drawings. And I really enjoyed hearing conversations about your work as a vehicle for envisioning, futures, but also for, transport of sorts. And I think some of the work that I was sharing at the Peter Bloom Gallery and exhibition was monoprints, series of monotypes or monoprints. And to me, that process, which I have kind of a setup here today. I work on these clear plates and then work with just moving ink around them, but it's real gestural for me, that process, and it's a form of, I almost think of it as a similar process to making music, where you rely on feeling and you rely on, whatever it is that you're whatever's traveling through you, I suppose. So it's a bit of memory for me when I do that type of work. And I reference it as a, accessing internalized memory that we have and in our DNA or in our existence. And those things, to me, are experienced in ways in daily life here at home that can only just understand when it flows through you. You can't really capture it. You can't focus on it. You can't pause it. You can't see it, but you know it's like passing through you. And for me, it's a feeling of joy. That's kind of inexplicable, but and that comes from living closely to the land, from participating in this process of that has been part of our survival and our families since time immemorial. And that would be, I reference actions like harvesting berries or filleting, processing salmon or fish or things that feed our family sustenance. And that part of our being is what I try to reference in those drawings, I suppose. It's that, those gestures and that. And they're not perfect, but they're not meant to be, and they can't be captured. They're not like, they're very fleeting and their creation as well, I suppose. So, but yeah, it's great to see you here too, Curtis. I didn't know you worked with LP.
Yeah, that was my school. Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I'm really fond of Lawrence's work, and we did an art barter, Lawrence and I have some of his original sketches from some of his works from his early sketchbooks. And so.
That's something we share. Those are cherished possession. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with the painting Portrait of a Residential Schoolboy. That painting.
I think so.
It was the one that I saw that drew me to him. I started dreaming, and I literally walked to his studio one day, not knowing where it was, and I ended up at his front door. But that's a story for another day. But so many connections between all of us. The last time Aphrodite and I were together was with my family at the opening at the Drawing Center, where that exhibition was around the idea of ancestral imagination. For so long, from the African diaspora, being in New York, I was hearing so much about the genetic trauma. And while witnessing artists really working from that space, but also witnessing parts of them being kind of damaged from just only living in that space. And I started to think about the celebration of the people that I don't know and find impossible to trace because the records only go so far back for a lot of us from the African diaspora. And so that whole exhibition was around the idea of who is this joy? Where is this coming from? When that feeling you described of not focusing on it, but when it's present and you're present in it, that almost controlling the hand, the gestural work. And so Aphrodite, just a love from my family to you, and just thank you for having me here, and honored to be here with both of you today.
I'm so touched. I don't know what to say. I think we should just draw.
Let's draw. Yes.
All right.
I think it's just so great.
Webcam view.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
So I'm just going to use ink. There's ink in here. My little miniature brush.
And I'm working with digital ink.
Hey, future. I really like those iPad drawing apps. I've been working on them a little bit.
Procreate's incredible. They've gotten very good.
Yeah, I've been messing with Fresco. Adobe Fresco is really fun one I've been enjoying.
Because music is important and dancing and that energy is important to both of you, when you're working, is there soundtracks playing for you? Or do you prefer to work with the sound of your own thoughts?
I often play music, I have to tell you the truth. with the kid
I
or
have.
in the background and the dog barking.
Yeah.
I like music.
We got
don't-
What do you
music going all day. Yeah, the soundtracks vary for me. I'm always listening to new stuff and trying to, revisiting older stuff. So.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna come back here. There we go. Maybe I'll try to get a little soundtrack going, something in the background for us.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I think the only time I've seen you in person, Nicholas, was at that Peter Bloom show, the opening of that show.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When was that, Curtis?
Oh gosh, time is something that
January.
It always
25.
January. Okay.
Yeah, and that was right before the world shut down.
Yeah.
So that was January 2020, right? And then I was going to meet Nicholas when he was in town to give a talk in February, right, Nicholas?
Yeah, that was canceled.
Yeah, then things went to shit, I mean, honestly.
I was supposed to circumnavigate the world.
Yeah.
And in March, literally, I was like, I had a ticket to go around the globe for some art things, and almost all of it got canceled. I ended up in Sydney for the Biennale, and then that got shut down. This is the longest I've stayed put in my life.
And how's that affected your practice? Has it?
Yeah, I love it. I love being home with my family. I love it. It's healthier not traveling so much. Being on the road is amazing and you meet incredible people, but the reality too is having, being out, staying put. I'm eating well, I'm resting, and I'm not socializing like I would be all the time. So it's good. I actually, I like this change of pace, and I hope I can, maintain it in some way as things potentially return back to normal, or not normal, but return back to whatever it is. How about you? How's it been?
It's been a whole world of change because I'm now based in Munich, and our son, my partner Anna, and I, we just had a baby boy, and he's 6 months. And so there's been so much change. And much like you, I think I was on a plane all the time, traveling somewhere for a project or residency and being based and using that as fuel for inspiration. So I think for the first while, it was a challenge for me to figure out what the work was going to be about in this space. And then it just became easy to open that door of imagination and be like, this is my time to really just play and to watch as Felix progresses and the changes in my relationship with my partner as we became parents and diving deeper into that. And I think it pushes me towards healthier making, a little more balance, whatever that means. I know when things start to open up again, perhaps we go back to the same schedules of, and so I'm trying to just really be grounded in the right now and not put pressures on myself to produce like I was in previous time, because it isn't that previous time. Afro,
Yes.
you said you're in your sister's studio,
This
or
was,
in your sister's space. Have you gone back to just like working in your apartment?
no, because I don't have an apartment. I lived in a rental. I bought an apartment in my parents' building. I moved
Uh-huh.
prior to prior to when they had a stay-at-home order in New York City. I was worried about them. Like I told you guys, they're in their
Mm-hmm.
60s and 70s and have a lot of, they're high risk. So my son and I went to stay with them temporarily, and I gave up my rental. I moved everything to storage. So I was living with my parents all year. And
Got it.
I basically have no home, no studio. I have been a nomad, and Iranians were nomads. So I was like, that's just in my DNA. They were nomadic people anyway, and they literally pitched their tents and then settled on the Persian plateau. So I have that too. I'm quite portable, even with my work. I can work with my brushes anywhere in any part of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't need a lot of stuff. So this year's been tough because my father got ill, then my mother got ill, and I've been making art, and I've had a show despite all of this. And my kids have been going to school and finishing school, and my daughter's been teaching, and my son is in high school. So I just feel like I've been making work nomadically whenever there's time. But even honestly, since I was 24, since I gave birth to my daughter, I have been nomadic in my work. Like there's no physical studio. It's
Mm-hmm.
all changing and changing. The only thing I can carry is on my back or, my body. And I'm very nomadic. So I can do it anywhere. I can even do it outdoors, makeshift, or in people's apartments. So that's been my year. It's been caring for
Yeah.
my and being with my kids. And I've loved the pause. They called it New York pause. I love
Yeah.
that pause. I really haven't been doing the social outings that I'm famous for. I feel like I always threw a dinner for friends and traveling through. There was always a guest room for friends traveling through, and it's all changed because my parents were high risk. I couldn't have guests, so I feel like I'm like a woman in her 40s who's living like a teenager. Kids she's responsible for and parents. So I have to be very mindful of their health and protecting them. And so it's been a struggle. And I feel like even this exhibition has been so special because I feel like how many exhibitions were actually able to be visited during the pandemic. Some of them closed, some of them the museums closed down. This museum has been accessible. People can go on the weekends. And so I'm so grateful that it's not just virtual. People actually have been walking through and emailing me or texting me, and they've experienced it. And it was meant to bring the two-dimensional drawings to life. So I felt like if you can meander through someone's lamentation and mourning, a little sisters, but then also
Mm-hmm.
feel sort of a labyrinth, and some of it is difficult and some of it is heartwarming, and then they get out of that labyrinth, and all these COVID restrictions. I'm deeply grateful to the Addison and for Ali for making this possible throughout this time. I mean, there hasn't been one weekend that it hasn't been shown because of COVID. So I'm deeply grateful. It's like almost 3 months, since January 16th to April 4th, continuously showing. So I've always wanted, I feel like I've always wanted my two-dimensional work to be in the 3D and in people's sculptural and physical landscapes. So I want to continue with that. So I feel like this is the beginning of a future of a lot more installation work. And I admired Nicholas's work and I admired your work, Curtis, because I felt like you brought the 2D to life, but also the sort of investigating a mythical other. I had been already doing that, but in photography. So I was like very inspired to think about how to do that in another installation where I create another heroine, or I create an ancestor I have no connection to, and I mine that history, and I'm just excited at the future of more installation work, because I feel like I don't want work to be trapped behind frames on a
Mhm.
I'm tired of it. You
Yeah.
know, I want people to walk through the work. Honestly, I want kids to be able to touch it. So how can I do that? I'm looking at so much installation work where there are kids who can play on your installation or your sculpture because it can't be destroyed, but the kids can
Yeah.
and adults can play. And how can they go through your space and engage with some things that you're dealing with, things they're dealing with? And how is it not just this kind of distant and thing? I don't know, this cold and distant thing behind a plexiglass or a window or a glass. I just so that's something I feel even more, maybe because of the restrictions on physical touch and personal touch. I'm like, the minute we can start hugging and touching, feeling and using our senses, I want an explosion. So that's those are the ideas I've had. And my daughter is turning 26 next year. So I started for her 25th birthday ripping off watercolor paper. So I counted 26 um, papers that I would then draw on abstract, but for her. And I bought and mother of pearl wooden inlaid box, which is very much like in Esfahan. This is from Egypt, but it's very similar in Iran. And I wanted to give her a gift, a box that she could take with her to her new living situation, her apartment, her future home, and a gift from a mother to a daughter. And I was already thinking of Pandora, the myth of Pandora, and how she opens the box and everything escapes except the one thing remaining in the box is hope. So in Greek it's elpida, and in Persian, in Farsi, it's omid. And I was thinking of how can I share that with my daughter, that Pandora didn't do something wrong cosmically by opening this vessel and this box and everything escaping, and the only thing remaining is hope. She didn't do some cosmic harm. She actually did something really quite wonderful, because even this year, at the end of all of this suffering through COVID, all of us have very different personal relations, sometimes very close and too close for comfort with COVID. Um, what's left after all this? I was thinking, the only thing that carried me through worrying about my mom and her experience with COVID and surviving respiratory failure is I never stopped hoping in
Mhm.
whatever it was a feeling, it was visceral, it was spiritual. I never stopped hoping. So my gift for my daughter personally, but also for other people out there, is they can take everything away from you: science, history, politics, the news. They can crush you in so many ways and make you pessimistic or terrified, but they can't take your hope from you. You have to have hope. If whatever is your spiritual system, religious system, you have to have hope, because that's what pulls you through. So that my overriding theme right now is Elpida, Pandora. She didn't do anything wrong. Opening that box was a service to humanity. And, women being smart is not a threat to the world. Having knowledge, but also aside from the cerebral, intellectual, I was thinking, hope is not. It's not tangible. You can't describe it, but it's there. It goes against all logic and even what doctors might say to you. And so, my thing right now is Elpida and Omi. And I remember in college, I was starting like the first Harvard Persian Student Society. There was none. There was a Hillel Foundation. There was an Arab Student Society. I was like, why aren't Persian kids getting together? Why after they left Iran and they are products of a revolution and diaspora, why do they not hang out? Why do they not even call themselves Iranian or whatever. So I started this student society at college. And I remember I met a boy whose original name was Omi, which is, I was like, your name means hope. He changed it to Mark. And I'm like, I don't get Mark, but I kind of like Omid. It sounds wonderful. And it means hope. And I don't really know what Mark means, but honestly, Omid tells us where you're from and some of the dreams and hopes maybe that your parents had for you. I don't know. And so I since I was like 18, 19, I was thinking, why would you change your name from Omid to Mark? I've been stuck with my names, Aphrodite Désirée Navab in Iran, in Greece, and in America. And I remember every country, they picked on me for these names. In Iran, why do you have a Greek first name? What the hell is this name? And then Greece, what is your last name? We can't even spell it in Greek correctly. And then in the US, I remember in middle school, a teacher took roll and said Aphrodite Navab. And then someone in the classroom said, who the hell would name their kid a god's name? So I never raised my hand. I was like, I'm gonna tell this girl that it's me, but that's my name. It's on my birth certificate. And she's like, who the hell would name their kid a god's name? And I wanted to say, you know what? Back then, I didn't have the courage.
You didn't have the language. Yeah.
Language. I mean, I came in the 1st grade. I was 10. So in middle school, I wasn't smart enough and savvy in English to say, listen, first of all, it's not a god, it's a goddess. Okay. Know your gods and goddesses. And this is Greek mythology, and it's important to Greek people. Okay. So, it's not so weird. There are Athenas all over America and Canada. Okay.
I don't know what, so I don't know what Nicholas's schooling was like, but I know, like, as you say that, I wish I could go back to the younger Curtis in elementary school and tell them, don't pull my hair, don't touch my hair, these things where you just, when you're different in whatever way makes you different, and you don't have the language. But now when I with Felix and him being biracial and being here in Germany, it's like I think about this all the time, how I will raise him in a way to be able to be proud of where he's from and who he is in a sea of difference, and to be able to stand up for himself and to,
It's so true. I was thinking when my daughter was born, she was born in America at Brigham and Women's, because I got pregnant a year after college. So I was a baby. And I gave birth to her at Brigham and Women's in Boston, and I named her Shahrzad after this Persian fictional storyteller who tells 1,001 Nights. And in the Middle East, she is known as a kind of feminist heroic figure because she tells 1,001 tales and stops her husband, the king, from killing a fresh wife every night because he was betrayed by his first wife. So it's like patriarchal, and but the story is through her own cunning and her own tales, she saves her own life, and she gets her sister too married to the brother of the king. So she actually she was really resourceful. So this is fictional, but I was like, that's going to be my daughter's name. She's my first child. She's going to be a storyteller. She has power and wit and strength and, and intelligence. So I gave my daughter that name, but I gave her the option of a Greek middle name, my mom's name, Katerina. And, very early on, nobody could pronounce her name in the US. They called her Shasta. They called her Shirzad. They called her Shaza. Nobody could say Shahrzad. And I was like, it's not that hard. It's an Indo-European name. HRZ should not be that hard, but trust me, it was hard. So she goes by Katerina and Katie, and that's beautiful, but it's what they can say. It's Greek. No, so my son, though, when he was born 10 years later, I was older and I was like, I want a lover, I don't want a fighter. He's going to be Persian hero of being a lover, not a fighter. He's not an epic hero that fought in a war against the enemy. He actually fell in love with the enemy daughter. so Bijan is known as a prince in the Persian epic poem called the Shahnameh, the epic book of kings, which is like for Iranians, the equivalent of Homer's Odyssey and Iliad for the Greeks. So I was like, this is just as important for the Persians. They love this epic book of kings. It's highly formulated to make the kings look great, right? And it's not feminist at all. Women only are their lovers, their wives, their sisters, their exploits. They don't factor in as heroes in these epic poems. But I felt like Bijan is going to be a different kind of hero. So when my son was born, I used to tell him in Greek and Persian and English, you're going to be a lover, not a fighter. And he would like look at me like, Mommy, what are we saying? And I just feel like all his life he's going to be someone who chooses to make relations and make peace through care and love, not through fighting, not through physical strength, not through war and battle like the Persian, Rostam, or the Greek Achilles, he's going to be a different kind of hero. He's actually going to fall in love with the enemy other, So that's something interesting that I feel like, I did this with my own little family because what's in a name? A name matters a lot. A name talks about the hopes and dreams of the parents or the mother or the father, but it also says where you're from, maybe, or more. I don't know. It matters, and people should say your name. And I was so against nicknames. People called me all sorts of nicknames when I came to the US. They nicknamed my first name, my second name. And I was like, why can't you just say the full name? It's not like huge names. Please call me by my name. So a lot of Nicholas's work and Curtis's work, I was like, is it that hard to get to know the artist and his background and his cultures and the issues he's dealing with and what matters to him? One of the first things I asked Nicholas is, what is his indigenous name and what does it mean? And ever since then, I've been calling him Raven.
Yes, Raven.
It's
I was
so-
just doing a little print here. I pulled it up. Hey.
Oh, yo, there you go.
Speaking of ravens, this is a raven because I know we talked about.
And I keep making crows, and I don't know why, but
We were talking about birds, you and I. So yeah. I was wondering if my pressure on I have a little print press over here, and I didn't check it yet, but I think it pulled all right. I didn't adjust it. So
It looks great. Looks great.
press, is it a big? What does your press look like?
I'll show you.
I want to see.
This is it right here.
Oh, it's a real press.
Yeah.
It has a lot of weight to it. Look at that.
Yeah, it worked.
It's a real printing press.
Give you a quick tour of the studio if you like.
I'd love
Yes, absolutely.
It's kind of a mess, but what studio is not ever a work in progress. This is kind of the main space. So I've got, I recently carved a 10-foot totem, and that was done over here with the baby gate to keep the little one away from all the sharp knives, because this is where tools that you don't want.
He wants to do what Dad is doing.
the
Oh,
tools.
he does. He has his own little tools. So he's got his small chainsaw for his totem on the ground there. This is the jewelry space. Let me turn the light on it here. So kind of a lot of metalworking and my little bench for engraving and that sort of stuff. Some casting equipment. And let's go to the music studio.
So I've seen Nicholas at his music studio, and I've seen Nicholas making jewelry. We've never had time to make art together. I mean, visual, like two-dimensional art.
There's a little photo space here that's kind of not really set up right now, but it's a photo studio. And I'm in the process of rewiring some of my music studios, so it's a little bit torn apart.
How many guitars are there, Nicholas?
Not enough.
Some analog synths. Yeah.
All analog. It's good. Man. It's a spot. I love having a chance to be in here to work, but I haven't. I've been busy with other things. So.
But you did just put out an album, yeah?
Yeah, it's actually going to be released in a month, end of this month.
Okay.
So we released a few singles on Sub Pop Records. Oh, the ball pit. Gotta have a studio ball pit.
Is that a recycled crate?
Yeah, it
A
is.
repurposed crate?
It is, shipping.
That's a great idea. I'm gonna use that one.
So, but yeah, the record's coming out. I'm really excited. A lot of really great collaborations on there, and so yeah. That's the space. I do have to take off here soon, though. I've got I'm working on a canoe project right now, and I have to head over to that. So.
Yeah, I know. We were talking about how you're the Renaissance man, and there's like absolutely so many activities that we could never do and make. Like that guy in high school who did 100 things that we would never even begin to start knowing about. You know? But we can aspire to doing that.
On that note, I'll share my digital drawing in honor of mothers and Aphrodite, since you're such a great mom and you love your mother very much. And my family and my mom has been sending good vibes to you. We're unable to connect as they're in Trinidad. And so I was thinking about the last time I saw her, and just a little digital
I love it.
rendering of Mama Bird here with her colorful eyeshadow and bright dresses.
Mama Santiago.
Mama Santiago.
That's great. Is it an NFT?
That's a whole other conversation. Hold on, let me turn off the lights so I can make one.
NFT.
Yeah. Yep. That's a whole other. Yeah. Did yours come out already? You already released one?
Oh, you know, I've got a few little ones I've been messing around with, but like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like explore the space and see what it is.
I think it's worth exploring. Whereas like they're early days, but it's totally worth exploring.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I haven't really like dropped anything specifically in a space that's curated for that or anything. Just kind of, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm all about all these new things and potential possibilities. So. But yeah, on that note, I do have to take off. I want to thank you all for being here.
I'm popping back on to thank you.
I wish, you know, I'd like to do this and spend more time. This is just really enjoyable, hearing everybody speak and share and work. And I just feel honored to be part of it. So I'm grateful, and congratulations on the show. And again, Gudashish, thank you for including me here in this space, and we'll meet in person someday. So
Yeah, maybe all of you at the Addison. We're a family-friendly art residency program. We'll even provide a ball pit if we have to. So
that's in the writer. Ball pit needs to be
okay. It's a deal. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your studios and just letting us have a little glimpse into your process and friendship. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great to connect with everybody. Yeah.
Too short and too sweet,
I know, too short.
and to be continued.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Take care.
thank you.
Bye.